Our good friend Yaël Ossowski with the Consumer Choice Center joins us this morning as part of our final half hour, as he does every Friday morning, Freedom Friday here on the Big Talker FM. ConsumerChoiceCenter.org, their website. You can find the latest news concerning consumer choice across the states and around the world. Host of the Consumer Choice Radio Show, 10 a.m. Saturdays here on the Big Talker FM. Yaël, my friend, how are you doing?
Hey, Joe, things are good. It's actually strange. The Billy Joel song you're playing is it's the podcast intro for my colleague, Bill Wiertz, who does our European version of Consumer Choice Radio. So that's a great crossover. Good tune. Feeling good on this Freedom Friday. And, why not? We're still locked down, so I guess we're all going to have fun indoors, I guess. Now.
For yourself, speak for yourself. I'm out and about, meeting people, seeing people, hugging people, and we're okay. We're going to make it. I'm not going to frat parties and, drinking, doing keg stands, but we're living life here in the state of North Carolina.
Well, I think you are the living embodiment of the frat party, Joe, and you're right beside the beach, so you guys got it all. So very, very jealous about that. So if any of you guys are out there on the coast, do enjoy that sand and that ocean, because those of us in landlocked countries don't get to have that very often.
Yeah, but you have a beautiful countryside, and I saw beautiful snow just the other day that you were out and about in with your beautiful little daughter, so I'm sure you find ways to enjoy it as well. Hey, Yaël, I mean, not too often, well, I don't know, we don't pay much attention to Canada here in the U.S., but you are a native, and there was news made on day one of the Biden administration that, in fact, he was going to cancel the permit and the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline through the middle of the country, while the Canucks had been moving full speed ahead and expecting, this process to move forward eventually and lead to some prosperity, some national security, and energy independence for these two nations that make up 2/3 of the North American continent. I mean, even the Canucks are pissed on day one of the Biden administration.
Yeah, and that's hard to see. You don't really get to see the kind of angle of Canada it brought up in the U.S. news, but it's a huge deal, and the main reason is because Canada, the one thing that we've got going for ourselves is natural resources, and specifically oil, specifically bitumen, and all of that is out in the province of Alberta. And the big business out west, and the reason that the west of Canada pretty much exists nowadays, is to try to get those resources out of the ground, get it refined, get it to the market. So really, there's been a huge push over many years to figure out how to do it. There was a very bad train accident that happened not far from my hometown in Quebec that was carrying all types of oil that blew up. Many people were killed in this city, and it turned people away from transiting oil by rail. So pipelines are actually one of the safest ways to do it. And this Keystone pipeline has been in talks with so many companies now since 2008. This is a long-term thing. There's been tens of thousands of jobs, billions of dollars in investment, and it's been very tough for the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, who's very much against any kind of oil for reasons of climate change. And he's put into this position where now that Biden is the one who strikes down the Keystone pipeline, which would bring that Canadian energy to the American shores for refinement and hopefully out to the market, now he's seen as a double bad guy, because he was always against domestic oil projects, and now this international oil project, which will likely sink the Canadian dollar a good amount, that's being canceled. Apparently, this is going to be President Joe Biden's first phone call with a foreign leader with Canada. So we'll see what happens in that conversation, but I'll tell you, Canada, it's a bit more decentralized than the United States, so the provincial leaders who are like the governors, they're very angry about this, specifically our guy up in Alberta, Jason Kenney. He's a good friend of the Consumer Choice Center. He's actually published a lot of our stuff on his Twitter page and Facebook. He's actually incredibly angry. This is a big deal for people in Alberta. It's a big deal for people in the middle of the United States to have this entire project kind of be shut down. I think we can get into that a bit later, Joe, but it's another argument for why we cannot have all of our laws just be written by executive order by presidents. We need Congress to do its job so this stuff isn't undone every 4 or every 8 years.
I mean, there's no question the impacts of this across the border. Jobs in jeopardy, fracturing a deal, as you said, that's been in the works for over a decade now. It creates a situation where neighboring countries on the continent of North America are doing something that will make our people more prosperous and we'll continue to, of course, strive to be more energy independent, and whatever that looks. I think there's an ability to diversify that in many different ways, not just through oil and fossil fuels. We talk about, of course, natural gas, nuclear. I wish we embraced a little bit more, which is the cleanest and the most sustainable, and there's no talk of that, of course. It's more wind, solar, renewable energy, and ripping apart most of our economy to get to that point. At least these are the proposals being put forth by those within the administration of the new commander-in-chief and many on the left. It takes away gains that we've made in the past year here for the United States when it comes to energy production, less reliant on adversaries and other nations around the world. I mean, when you put it all together, this sounds like the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is this is all for show. It is a lot of symbolism. It's the idea that now the United States will move towards a post-carbon future. But that's just not true. I mean, look, this is in the Canadian soil. It's in the ground. Maybe it won't transit through the United States, but that doesn't mean it ain't going to China. It doesn't mean it ain't going to Europe. Why not have the U.S. in on the deal, be able to create tens of thousands of jobs, have all kinds of investors, be able to make money through their retirement portfolios? It's been taken away. And I think I should hook you up with our friends at the American Conservation Council or Coalition, Joe, because they're actually a group of young people who are very much into energy and also into figuring out how to deal with climate change, and they believe in market proposals. And these kind of just nixing of huge energy projects, really it's just symbolism. And I think that's really what's happening. We're not talking about innovation. We're not talking about all kinds of new technologies being deployed, all kinds of new innovation. It's just stopping an ongoing project. It's sad to see. Really, it is very hard for the people who are out there in Western Canada and people up and down the United States where, the Keystone Pipeline, I mean, goodness, how much of it is built? Much more than the Mexican border wall. But to continue to see this kind of be punted like a political football, I mean, this is kind of crazy. If you are an investor, if you're an entrepreneur, how are you able to survive? It's just like with the restaurants and everything else. How are you able to survive if everything is kind of done on a whim and is basically signed away, all these years of hard work just at a moment's notice? I think we're definitely going to see an impact. People are already seeing an impact at the pump. I've heard 20 cents as much in some areas. This is the kind of stuff that happens, everybody. When you've got presidents and you've got politicians who start messing around with policies and impacting you, that means you as a consumer got to pay more. And that's pretty unfortunate.
And pay more for abundant energy that we have and do not want to tap into. And it's not like other developed nations around the world are all just scaling back completely on fossil fuels. When you look at China, for instance, and Russia, for instance, many of our adversaries out there around the world, they utilize these things and they're building on these resources within their own boundaries. And even in places where, policies, as we have highlighted, of course, the Nordic countries, they are oil rich and they are tapping into it as well, which helps pay for a lot of the things that are promoted here as, socialism.
Yeah, if the Sovereign Wealth Fund of the Kingdom of Norway was opened up to any one of us, we'd all be billionaires or trillionaires by now. But yeah, this just goes to show that there is a lot that can be done, and I do think that markets are finding solutions for many of the climate and environmental issues that people are trying to come around with. That's why we have the Paris Climate Accords. That's why we have all these international agreements. But the people who are actually doing something about it are not sitting in political offices. They're people like Elon Musk, who actually come up with technological solutions. And what happens to them? Well, they get riled out of town. They get thrown out of California because the politicians don't like them. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we're seeing play out every day. We can all have whims and wishes about how we wish policies to go, but this has real impact on people. And if our policies are not allowing innovation to happen, that's going to make us much poorer and definitely going to put us at the bottom of the list when it comes to making us have economic growth, personal growth. I mean, that's very important. It's something that is unfortunately getting lost already in day 3 of the Joe Biden administration.
Isn't it, true that the most basic, fundamental thing that helps, secure an economy's base and the ability for its people to grow and prosper, affordable, efficient, power, energy, and to be able to harness that and allow people to, then grow from there and prosper from there?
Definitely, and it has a lot to do with the different sources, and you need to have different sources. And in my part of Canada, where I was born, it's a lot of hydroelectricity. It's like that a lot in the northeast of the United States. It's large dams, hydroelectric dams, a big thing in Central Europe, but we also have nuclear. So you need to have the various sources because, yeah, sometimes the solar panels will work great if you're in California and Arizona. Ain't going to work so well if you're hanging out in Wisconsin. So there's all types of this stuff that needs to be diversified, and the only way to do that is to provide clear rules for entrepreneurs. If all of a sudden we're just going to change the rules every 4 or 8 years, if I was an investor, or even if I've got my Robinhood app open, I'm not going to put my money into these companies because I don't know what's going to happen. I'd rather bet on something that I know will happen, like the opening of sports betting in Michigan, for example, or great innovative alcohol companies like your Blue Shark vodka there, or any others. I mean, there are people who are actually providing great products to people out there that people are willing to invest in, and they're not necessarily going to just be thrown under the bus when the next politician comes around.
With that said, along with, of course, the executive order canceling the Keystone pipeline permit, also re-engaging with the World Health Organization, Yaël, you have reported extensively on the WHO over the years. I mean, dating all the way back, I can find articles back to 2015-16 through the Consumer Choice Center and some of the other publications that you're in. Just give us a little backstory again. Remind us, who the World Health Organization is, and what they're about, and where our money goes when they engage in, trying to lobby countries for one reason or the other. Where their focus has been, particularly over the last several years.
Well, the World Health Organization is an organ of the United Nations, so yet another large international bureaucracy, and most countries of the world are involved. They sign up or pay the fees. Sometimes it's anywhere between $100 or $200 million, depending on your population. And what we started seeing many years ago is that, instead of focusing on real epidemics and pandemics that were already springing up in places across, let's say, the African continent, we had Ebola, which was huge. We've had malaria. They were just very slow. And this is exactly what their focus is supposed to be. But instead of doing that, instead of actually putting their resources into finding the best researchers, finding out how to sequence the DNA of some of these viruses and to try to get vaccines on the market and work with companies to get them to the market, they were focusing on things like, people playing video games too much. Or the epidemic of vaping. They put hundreds of millions of dollars into trying to stop innovation for people who are just trying to use e-cigarettes to transition away from smoking. So we saw that trend happening very, very early on. And you wed that with the headlines that were coming about their grand, luxurious meetings that they were having in the Seychelles or some other islands as well in the Caribbean. These junkets were costing $100 or $200 million. And, what were they really doing there? They were coming up with more rules to try to figure out how to deal with your lifestyle freedom. And they weren't talking about pandemics. They weren't talking about what might happen with future coronaviruses or anything else. And, the pay that many of the people had within this very bloated bureaucracy was just very astronomical compared to just the average blue-collar American. So we saw those problems very early on. We started a campaign to defund the World Health Organization as far back as 2016. We did international roundtables. I was in London. I was in Ontario. I was in Washington, D.C. We were just trying to get journalists to wake up to what was happening. Unfortunately, it came to 2020 with Wuhan, China, and the start of the coronavirus pandemic. And, all the problems that we discussed have come to fruition. They missed the ball on what was happening in China. They trusted the Chinese Communist Party way too early. They didn't send enough resources. They're trying to do their investigations now and sending people, and they're getting blocked. And this is really what happens when you have bloated bureaucracies. So we did support when President Trump took the U.S. out of the World Health Organization. And it's sad that Joe Biden has just signed up with no concessions. We all understand the need for international health bureaucracies and to have some kind of coordination between countries, but have some concessions here, man. We're the biggest single nation payer to this organization, and we come back to the table and we don't even ask for anything in return. I mean, come on, that is insane. They've let us down. They've let the whole world down. And I think it's rather sad that Joe Biden was able to do this with no criticism anywhere. Hopefully, we'll hold his feet to the fire as much as we did with President Trump on other issues too.
Yeah, well, I mean, the color scheme of Air Force One, a big topic for discussion on day one of the press briefing at the White House. And then what was it yesterday? Joe Biden got a little snappy, sounded like a Walter Matthau or Jack Lemmon and grumpy old men. He was a little grumpy yesterday when he was asked a question about COVID response. And is this going to be common course here, Yaël, that we're going to expect to see kind of these softball type questions? No scandal-free administration. Remember, the Obama administration was scandal-free. Joe Biden said it himself. I mean, this is a basic, in 2 minutes, you just broke down the entire World Health Organization and why we should be questioning, us re-entering into something as the largest funder of this bureaucratic group of countries. And in a minute, literally, you laid it all out there for us. Yet not one reporter who makes a lot more money than we do asked this question yesterday or the day prior.
Yeah, it's going to be a different kind of I guess, media environment in the next couple of years. I think it's a good opportunity. I read a couple of things from some other journos there in D.C. saying that, now's the time to actually demystify the presidency. I think we've all put way too much stock in what this position is supposed to mean, that there's supposed to be a central agenda, that there's supposed to be a plan or a budget that's, dreamt up by the president. That's just not how our Constitution works. Our Congress is supposed to be empowered to make these decisions so that they're enshrined in law and they can't be revoked with the next presidency. And that's the problem with governing by the pen, as President Obama did and as President Trump did. There's a lot of great stuff that we love that he did by the pen, but it's not the best way to do things because precisely what we see this week, they can be undone in a moment's notice. So I hope we demystify the presidency a little bit. I hope we don't talk about broader unity as if it's something, obviously it makes us feel good, but it doesn't mean anything because the laws need to be written by the Congress. They need to be combative. We need to represent every single diverse thought that we have in our country and our philosophy and between the political parties. And that's how we find the best laws possible. So we debate them among our parties, we use our systems and our institutions, and we use the Constitution. If we put all of our hopes and dreams into a politician or a president, we're going to be let down. Many Trump people are probably feeling let down now or might have previously. The same thing will happen with the Biden folks. So the best way to think about it is, look, be passionate for what you're passionate about. Advocate for that. Let's use our institutions. We have it within our power. We have a very great, beautiful system. Many people are trying to replicate the American model, and they aren't doing too well, mostly because of the very things that we've been talking about. So let's continue to empower our representatives. Let's continue to empower Congress. The more we can do that and the more we can demystify the presidency, I think we're just going to be a bit better off.
Yaël, as I let you go, I'm not one to look, backwards and into the past, but it is, of course, still within the week at least, and we want to move forward. But and we'll see what happens with this whole impeachment thing eventually with the Senate. But President Trump issued a bunch of pardons in the 11th hour on the final night of his administration, and the couple of rappers here, a couple of others there. Including one here from the state of North Carolina, a former congressional figure and chair of the NCGOP, Robin Hayes. He got into a little, he got in a little trouble, and the president got him off the hook. And there were some other people that we think may have been more deserving of a presidential pardon. Congressman Hayes, I met him one time. He came to Wilmington as chair of the NCGOP. And as soon as he walked out of his car with like 4 armed security guards, I was like, oh boy, this guy's just a complete elite Washington insider who is running the NCGOP, which is why a lot of Republican-leaning voters here in North Carolina have felt disenfranchised over the past number of years because as the grassroots group of conservatives and Republicans and those who lean to the center right, they helped Republicans get into the majority of the General Assembly. They have felt disenfranchised in that someone like a Robin Hayes just completely put his nose up to the folks that got Republicans into office within North Carolina for the first time in 120 years. So I was never a big fan. And in fact, one of our first broadcasts when the NC GOP convention was to, of course, call for a change in leadership. And then, of course, all this comes down the pipeline, and he gets in a bunch of trouble. President Trump issues him a pardon in the 11th hour the other night.
Yeah, and I have no ill will specifically for Robin Hayes. He was my congressman when I was growing up and I started becoming interested in politics. I would write his office pretty often to just figure out how he was voting on stuff. I thought that was an interesting way. And everything that I mentioned in the previous segment about, holding your representatives accountable, that's what I was trying to do as a young whippersnapper. But he was my congressman. He represented the area well. He definitely served, for the NASCAR community and definitely for the Charlotte area there. So I don't have anything bad to say there. But then when it came to his sort of tenure as the head of the Republican Party in North Carolina, whether it was his fault or not, or he was put in that position, he helped facilitate this bribe that went to the insurance commissioner. And this was done by a businessman who didn't like how he was being treated by the government, which I totally understand and I get, but there are legal mechanisms to do that. That's what we do every day at Consumer Choice Center. We're not bribing public officials, and we don't think anyone should do that, and there's a good reason it's illegal. So he was not in the end, he did not plead to that. He was able to skate by on those charges, but he did plead guilty to lying to the FBI, which is something that has been brought up, and there's all kind of problems with that. But still, very bad situation. He did not serve any prison time, and basically now all these months later was able to receive a pardon that was pushed by many of the senators in North Carolina, much of our congressional delegation, no doubt for the service to the Republican Party, but we have to think of country over party and principles. And what Robin Hayes did in his tenure was a breach of public trust. And, while he was able to skate by without prison time, we have states in our union where cannabis is fully legal, yet in our state we have 3,000 people in jail for cannabis possession. And none of them, were able to skate by with just probation or anything like that. They're still in prison, they're still in jail, and they didn't get any pardon from President Trump, and I don't think they'll get one from Governor Roy Cooper anytime soon. So it was hard to see, but look, we're just going to continue to hold our politicians accountable. I think that's all we can do, and hope that our system prevails. And I think as long as we believe in that and keep pushing for it, and we follow the rules, and we believe in the rule of law, Joe, I think we have something very beautiful to defend.
Well, we know that there are two sets of rules for you and me, and then, of course, the fat cat politicians who play the insider track on many different things, Robin Hayes being one of them. Yaël, thank you so much. We look forward to hearing your Consumer Choice Radio broadcast tomorrow morning. I'm always tuned in and listening with a keen ear because we've got plenty of people commenting on all of the local programming that we provide on Saturdays. You have been a part of it now for a year or so, and we're looking forward to more contributions like you provide here this morning on the Big Talker FM.
Great to be a part of it, Joe. Thank you so much.
Yaël, Ossowski, Consumer Choice Radio, 10 o'clock Saturday mornings here on the Big Talker FM. Also, of course, on their website, consumerchoicecenter.org.